All right, so are you curious about Red One? Want to know if it's worth adding to your holiday watch list? We're going to do a deep dive into a review. And, well, it doesn't exactly give the movie much praise, but hey, sometimes even negative reviews can offer some interesting insights, right?
Absolutely. In this case, the reviewer actually starts by highlighting what drew them to the film initially. You've got The Rock in a Christmas movie, teaming up with Chris Evans. That alone is a pretty strong hook.
Yeah, totally. And then you've got this concept of Santa's security force, which the review calls a perfect recipe on paper. But what do you make of that idea? Santa needing protection. What kind of threats is he facing these days that require a whole security detail?
Well, it seems like one of those threats is, well, it's the stuff of holiday nightmares. Grilla, a figure straight out of Christmas lore, known for punishing those on the naughty list.
Yeah.
You could say she's like the anti-Santa.
Krampus's mom. Right. I remember reading a bit about her. The review mentions that the movie actually dives into some of this lesser-known Christmas mythology, which on the surface sounds pretty cool.
It does. And according to the review, they cast Christopher Hivju, who played Tormund in Game of Thrones, as Krampus. So, they're at least aiming for some visual impact there.
Yeah, definitely some interesting choices being made. The review even points out that the opening act has this playful, almost whimsical vibe, and that Johnson and Evans have great chemistry on screen. They even single out Evans's performance as charming but flawed, which makes you wonder, where did things go wrong?
That's where the review takes a turn. They describe the script as feeling overstuffed and meandering, full of what they call half-baked ideas that never quite come together.
So not just a simple case of too many plot threads, but maybe those threads aren't very well developed either.
Exactly. And this lack of focus seems to extend to the villain, Grilla. The review doesn't hold back, calls her uninspired, and points out that her motivations are pretty weak. They even quote a line where Grilla basically says she's evil because Christmas is too happy. Not exactly a nuanced or compelling villain, right?
Oof, that's rough. It almost sounds like they tried to force a villain into a story that didn't really need one.
Right. And to make matters worse, the reviewer says the performance is awkward, and the film's attempt to explain away Grilla's youthful appearance, she's played by Kiernan Shipka, falls completely flat. It seems like they missed an opportunity to create a truly menacing villain, someone who could have really elevated the stakes of this story.
Okay, so we've got a messy script and a villain that sounds more laughable than terrifying. The review also mentioned problems with the action sequences, right? Didn't they compare it to a video game?
Yeah, and not in a good way. They specifically call out the reliance on bad CGI, even going as far to say the visuals feel like a low-budget video game. Considering this is supposed to be a big holiday action flick, I imagine that's a pretty significant letdown.
Especially for audiences who are used to seeing Dwayne Johnson in these high-octane, visually spectacular roles. I guess explosions and CGI reindeer can only take you so far if the story and characters aren't compelling.
And that seems to be the main takeaway from this review. Despite some initial promise, Red One might be another case of style over substance. The reviewer even points out that the whole exploration of Christmas myths, which initially seemed interesting, ends up feeling underwhelming and underdeveloped.
Like they had this cool idea but didn't quite know what to do with it, almost like they were afraid to fully commit to the darker, less familiar aspects of Christmas lore.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you have this contrast between the potentially rich mythology and then these generic, uninspired action sequences. It's like two different movies trying to occupy the same space.
So maybe that disconnect speaks to a larger issue with the film's overall tone and execution. Maybe it tried to be too many things at once and ended up losing its way.
Perhaps. And it makes you wonder, what would it have taken for Red One to really capitalize on those mythological elements? Was it a matter of the script, the direction, or maybe even the overall tone they were going for?
You know, this whole conversation about Red One and the reviewer's critique of Dwayne Johnson's performance makes me wonder about his career choices lately. This isn't the first time he's been in a film that hasn't quite lived up to expectations. What do you think this says about his choices as an actor? Is he playing it too safe? Or is Hollywood just not giving him the right material?
That's a great question. And it's interesting because Dwayne Johnson has built this incredibly successful career by being incredibly likable, delivering that consistent action comedy entertainment. You know what you're getting with a rock movie? Big muscles, bigger laughs, and plenty of explosions. But maybe, like you said, there's a sense that he's playing it safe, sticking to a formula that might be getting a bit predictable.
Right. And we've seen this happen with other action stars, haven't we? They reach a point where they need to evolve or risk becoming a caricature of themselves.
Exactly. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone. They all went through phases where they had to branch out, try different genres, stretch their acting muscles a bit.
Yeah.
It's not easy to break free from that action hero mold, but it can be essential for long-term success.
So what do you think? Is it time for The Rock to shake things up? Should he be looking for roles that challenge him in new ways?
It's definitely something to consider. He's shown glimpses of that range before, hasn't he? Think back to Moana, where he voiced Maui. He brought such heart and humor to that animated role.
Oh, that's a great example. And he was fantastic in Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, and its sequel. Those films definitely leaned more into the comedic side of his persona, and he nailed it.
Right. And even in some of his more action-heavy roles,
Mm.
like Fast Five or Pain and Gain,
Mm.
he's shown that he can bring depth and complexity to his characters. So the potential is there. It's just a matter of finding the right projects that allow him to explore those different facets of his talent.
It's almost like that idea of wasted potential that the reviewer mentioned about the movie itself applies to Johnson's career as well. It's like there's this sense that he could be doing so much more, pushing himself further as an actor.
I see what you mean. And you have to remember that the pressure to maintain that blockbuster success can be immense. It can be tempting to stick with what works, even if it means playing it safe creatively. But I think audiences are hungry for something more, something that surprises them, something that shows a different side of The Rock.
Maybe that's the key. Finding projects that he truly believes in, where he can bring that same energy and charisma, but in new and unexpected ways.
Exactly. Maybe a well-written drama, or a historical epic,
Mm.
or even a quirky indie comedy. Who knows? The point is he doesn't have to abandon what's made him successful. But maybe it's time to expand his horizons, explore new genres, and take some risks.
So circling back to Red One, even though the review isn't glowing, maybe it's a good opportunity for The Rock to learn and grow. Maybe it's a stepping stone to something bigger and better.
I think that's a great way to look at it. Every experience, even the less successful ones, can offer valuable lessons and insights. And who knows, maybe this movie will inspire him to take some creative leaps in the future.
Well, you've given us and hopefully our listener a lot to think about regarding The Rock and his career choices. But let's refocus on Red One itself for a moment. The review highlights some appealing elements, like the initial premise and the chemistry between Johnson and Evans, but ultimately seems to find it falls short due to a weak script, an uninspired villain, and underwhelming action.
And you're right, it does seem like a mixed bag. But even within those criticisms, there are some thought-provoking points. The reviewer mentions how the movie attempts to blend Christmas myths with action, which raises an interesting question.
Is there an audience out there for a more lighthearted, mythology-based Christmas action movie? Or has that ship sailed? I mean, we've seen some pretty wild takes on the holiday genre over the years.
That's a great question. And it really speaks to the evolving landscape of holiday films. We've gone from traditional heartwarming stories like Miracle on 34th Street to action-packed adventures like Die Hard to dark comedies like Bad Santa. It seems like there's room for just about anything, as long as it captures the spirit of the season in some way.
So are you saying there's still hope for a movie that blends Christmas mythology with action? Could Red One, even with its flaws, be a sign that audiences are looking for something different? Something that goes beyond the typical holiday tropes?
I think it's definitely possible. Take Krampus, for example. He's a figure from folklore who punishes naughty children, which sounds pretty dark on the surface. But we've seen successful films that have incorporated Krampus in both comedic and horror contexts.
Right, like that 2015 Krampus movie. It had some genuinely creepy moments,
Mhm.
but also managed to inject some humor into the mix. Do you think finding that balance is key? Maybe Red One struggled because it couldn't quite decide what it wanted to be.
I think tone and execution are crucial. When you're dealing with these kinds of genre mashups, if you can create a world that feels believable and engaging, and then weave in the action and mythology in a way that feels organic, you might just have a winning formula. Think about Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a space adventure filled with humor, heart, and some pretty bizarre characters. But it all works because the tone is consistent and the filmmakers committed to their vision.
I see what you mean. It's not just about throwing a bunch of cool elements together. It's about making sure those elements complement each other and create a cohesive whole. So what advice would you give to someone who wants to make a successful Christmas action movie? What lessons can we learn from Red One, even if it's not a critical darling?
I'd say first and foremost, don't be afraid to embrace the unique aspects of Christmas mythology. There's a wealth of fascinating stories and characters to draw from. And don't shy away from the darker elements either. Just make sure they're balanced with humor, heart, and a sense of wonder. And of course, pay attention to the details. Make sure the action sequences are well choreographed and exciting, and don't skimp on the special effects.
It sounds like there's a real opportunity here for filmmakers to create something truly special. Maybe Red One, despite its shortcomings, will inspire a new wave of Christmas action movies that push the boundaries of the genre and offer audiences something fresh and exciting.
I hope so. It's always fascinating to see how filmmakers reinterpret familiar themes and traditions. And who knows? Maybe somewhere out there, a budding screenwriter is already crafting the next great Christmas action epic, inspired by this very conversation.
That would be amazing. All right, so the consensus seems to be that Red One might not be a holiday classic, but it definitely sparked a lot of interesting discussion about The Rock's career, the potential for Christmas action movies, and the importance of finding the right balance between mythology action and holiday cheer.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that even movies that don't quite hit the mark can still offer valuable insights and inspire us to think differently about the stories we tell and the experiences we share.
Well said. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Red One, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. What kind of Christmas action movie would you create? What myths would you explore? Hit us up on social media and let us know.
Until then, happy holidays. And keep exploring those fascinating corners of the world, whether it's through movies, books, or even just your own imagination.